What happens when a harmless bet turns into a disaster that destroys a marriage? How could one night of flirting for laughs lead to legal documents turning up at my office, right in front of everyone I know? Can my husband really take everything from me because of one stupid mistake? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The bass thrummed through my chest as I surveyed the Velvet Loop, downtown's hottest bar on a Friday night. The place was packed with 20 and 30-somethings, all dressed to impress and ready to let loose after another grueling work week. I adjusted my black dress, the one Daniel always said made me look stunning, and took a sip of my Cosmopolitan. "Come on, Philo." Jenna leaned across our high-top table, her voice barely audible over the music. "You've been complaining for months about how boring your life has become. Here's your chance to prove you've still got it." I rolled my eyes, but I could feel the familiar flutter of excitement in my stomach. At 32, I was hardly over the hill, but sometimes I felt invisible. Working in HR at a mid-sized accounting firm wasn't exactly glamorous, and most days I felt like I was just going through the motions. Daniel and I had settled into a routine that felt more like roommates than husband and wife. "It's just a dance, Philomene," my friend Sarah chimed in, using my full name the way she always did when she was trying to make a point. "You flirt with some random guy, dance with him for one song, and boom, you win the bet. $50 says you won't do it." $50? I laughed, feeling the alcohol warm my cheeks. "You're seriously underestimating me." The truth was, I missed feeling desired. Daniel barely looked up from his laptop most evenings, and our conversations had dwindled to logistics about our 7-year-old daughter Tessa's schedule and household responsibilities. When was the last time a man had looked at me like I was the most beautiful woman in the room? My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Daniel. "How's girls' night? Hope you're having fun. Love you." I stared at the message for a moment, feeling a pang of something. Guilt? Annoyance? I wasn't sure. Here I was, finally having some excitement in my life, and he was checking up on me like I was a teenager with a curfew. "Earth to Philo." Jenna waved her hand in front of my face. "So what's it going to be? Are you going to prove you're still the confident, sexy woman we all know and love, or are you going to sit here texting your husband all night?" I looked around the bar again, my eyes landing on a tall, dark-haired man near the dance floor. He was probably in his late 20s, with the kind of easy smile that suggested he knew exactly how attractive he was. He caught me looking and raised his beer bottle in my direction. "Fine," I said, downing the rest of my drink and standing up. "But when I win this bet, you're all buying my drinks for the rest of the night." My friends cheered as I made my way across the crowded floor, my heels clicking against the polished concrete. The man, who introduced himself as Evan, was even more attractive up close. He had green eyes, and the kind of stubble that looked effortlessly perfect. "I'm Philomene," I said, extending my hand, "but my friends call me Philo." "Beautiful name for a beautiful woman," he replied, and I felt that familiar rush of validation I'd been craving. "Would you like to dance?" The song was perfect, sultry and slow enough to justify getting close, but with enough of a beat to make it feel playful rather than romantic. Evan was a good dancer, confident without being aggressive, and I found myself relaxing into his lead. "You're very good at this," I said, looking up at him as we swayed together. "I should hope so," he grinned. "I'm a bartender. Dancing with beautiful customers is part of the job description." I laughed, feeling more alive than I had in months. This was harmless fun, exactly what I needed. Just two adults enjoying a dance, nothing more. Daniel would understand if he could see how innocent it all was. But as the song wound down and Evan's hands lingered on my waist, I caught sight of a figure near the bar's entrance. A man in a dark coat, standing perfectly still while everyone around him moved and laughed and danced. Something about his posture looked familiar, but before I could get a better look, he was gone. "Thank you for the dance," I said to Evan, suddenly feeling like I needed to get back to my friends. "The pleasure was all mine," he replied, pressing a business card into my hand. "In case you ever want to continue this conversation." I made my way back to the table, where my friends were practically vibrating with excitement. "Oh my God, Philo!" Sarah squealed. "That was incredible. You two looked amazing together." "Did you see how he was looking at you?" Jenna added. "Like you were the only woman in the room." I smiled and accepted their congratulations, but I couldn't shake the image of that man in the dark coat. It was probably nothing, just my imagination playing tricks on me after one too many drinks. But as we gathered our things to leave, I found myself looking over my shoulder, scanning the crowd for a familiar face I hoped I wouldn't find. The next morning came too early, announced by Tessa bouncing on our bed at 7:30 sharp. My head was pounding from the combination of cosmopolitans and staying out until nearly 2 in the morning, but I forced myself to smile as our daughter chattered about her plans for Saturday. "Mommy, can we go to the park today? And maybe get ice cream? Daddy said we could if you felt good when you got home." Daniel was already up, I realized, hearing the shower running in our ensuite bathroom. He was always an early riser, even on weekends, while I preferred to sleep in when possible. Just another way we'd grown apart over the years. "Sure, sweetheart," I managed, sitting up and immediately regretting the sudden movement. "Let Mommy get some coffee first, okay?" By the time I made it downstairs to the kitchen, Daniel was already there, fully dressed and reading something on his tablet while he ate toast. He looked up when I entered, and I searched his face for any sign that he might have seen me at the bar. But his expression was neutral, maybe even a little concerned. "How was girls' night?" he asked, the same question he'd texted me the night before. "You got in pretty late." "It was fine," I said, perhaps a little too quickly. "Just the usual. Drinks, dancing, catching up. You know how it is." "Dancing?" There was something in his tone I couldn't quite identify. "I thought you guys usually just sat around and gossiped." I poured myself a large cup of coffee, using the time to think about how to respond. "Well, yes, mostly, but the music was good, so we danced a little. Nothing crazy." Daniel nodded slowly, but he was watching me more carefully than usual. "With each other?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, did you dance with each other, or were there other people involved?" The question felt loaded somehow, like he was fishing for information. I laughed, trying to keep things light. "Daniel, you're being weird. It's a bar. People dance, sometimes with strangers. It's not a big deal." "I didn't say it was a big deal," he replied quietly. "I was just asking." But something in his tone suggested it might be a bigger deal than he was letting on. I studied his face, looking for clues, but Daniel had always been hard to read. It was one of the things that had attracted me to him initially, his calm, steady presence. But lately, it just felt like living with a stranger. "Are you jealous?" I asked, half joking, but also genuinely curious. Because that would actually be kind of flattering. "When was the last time you cared enough about what I was doing to be jealous?" Daniel set down his tablet and looked at me directly. "I always care about what you're doing, Philo. You're my wife." "Right," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "Your wife who you barely talk to unless it's about Tessa's schedule or paying bills. That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I could feel the familiar resentment rising in my chest. When was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time you asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer? When was the last time you looked at me like you actually found me attractive? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "Is that what last night was about? You feeling unattractive?" The question hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. Last night was about having fun with my friends, something I'm apparently not allowed to do without getting the 3rd degree. "I'm not giving you the 3rd degree. I asked how your night was." "No, you asked specifically about dancing, like you were trying to catch me in something." "Maybe because you're acting like you have something to hide." The accusation stung, because it wasn't entirely wrong. I did have something to hide, not because what I'd done was terrible, but because I knew Daniel wouldn't understand. He'd never understood my need for excitement, for feeling alive and desired. He was content with our quiet, predictable life, in a way that sometimes made me feel like I was suffocating. "I'm not hiding anything," I said firmly. "I went out with my friends, we had some drinks, we danced a little, and I came home. End of story. If you have a problem with that, maybe you should examine why you're so insecure." Daniel flinched slightly at the word insecure, and I felt a small stab of satisfaction. It was a low blow, but he'd started this interrogation. "I'm not insecure," he said quietly. "I just know my wife, and you're acting strange." "I'm acting strange because I'm hungover and you're grilling me about a perfectly innocent night out." Tessa appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, but now looking uncertain. "Are you guys fighting?" "No, sweetheart," I said quickly, forcing a smile. "Daddy's just being a little grumpy this morning. You know how he gets when he doesn't have enough coffee." I saw Daniel's jaw tighten at my comment, but he didn't contradict me in front of our daughter. Instead, he stood up and rinsed his plate in the sink. "I'm going to run some errands," he said, not looking at either of us. "I'll be back in a few hours." After he left, Tessa climbed onto the stool next to mine at the kitchen island. "Is Daddy mad at you?" "No, baby," I said, stroking her hair. "Sometimes grown-ups just have disagreements. It doesn't mean we don't love each other." But as I said the words, I wondered if they were true. Did Daniel and I still love each other, or were we just going through the motions for Tessa's sake? And more importantly, did it matter? Maybe what I'd felt last night with Evan, that spark of attraction and excitement, was more important than whatever Daniel and I had settled into. Later that afternoon, when Daniel still hadn't returned from his errands, I called Jenna to rehash the previous night. "You were absolutely glowing," she said. "I haven't seen you that happy in months." "What did tall, dark, and handsome say to you?" "Nothing earth-shattering," I laughed. "But it felt good to be noticed, you know, to feel attractive and interesting again." "Did you keep his card?" I glanced toward my purse where Evan's business card was tucked safely in my wallet. "Maybe." "Philo, you should text him." "I'm married, Jenna." "So, you're not dead. And from what you've told me, Daniel barely pays attention to you anyway. Maybe a little harmless flirtation would be good for you. Might even make him appreciate what he has." The idea was tempting, I had to admit. What would be the harm in a little conversation? It wasn't like I was planning to have an affair. I just wanted to feel valued and desired again, the way Evan had made me feel with just one dance. When Daniel finally came home, he was carrying grocery bags and seemed determined to act like our morning conversation had never happened. But I noticed he was quieter than usual during dinner, and he kept glancing at his phone in a way that seemed almost secretive. "Everything okay?" I asked as we cleaned up the dishes. "Fine," he said, but he didn't meet my eyes. That night, as we got ready for bed, I caught him looking at something on his phone again. When I tried to see what he was looking at, he quickly closed the app. "What was that?" "Nothing important," he said, plugging his phone into the charger. "Just checking something." But I could have sworn I saw something that looked like a video player before he closed it. And for just a moment, I thought I recognized the interior of the velvet loop on his screen. Sunday dinner at Daniel's mother's house was a weekly tradition I'd grown to dread. Paula Vane had never particularly liked me, though she'd always been polite enough to maintain the facade of family harmony. She thought I wasn't good enough for her precious son, and while she'd never said it directly, I could feel her disapproval in every interaction. This week felt different, though. Paula seemed even more distant than usual, and Daniel's brother Marcus kept shooting me strange looks across the dining room table. Even Tessa seemed to pick up on the tension, eating her roast beef in uncharacteristic silence. "So, Philomene," Paula said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she was about to say something pointed, "Daniel mentioned you had quite the evening out on Friday." I glanced at Daniel, who was focused intently on cutting his meat. "Just a girls' night, nothing too exciting." "Really? Paula's eyebrows rose slightly. Because it sounded like there was dancing involved. The way she said dancing made it sound like something scandalous. I forced a laugh, determined not to let her get under my skin. Yes, Paula, there was dancing. It's what people do at bars sometimes. Of course, she said smoothly. I just think it's interesting that a married woman with a young daughter feels the need to go out dancing with strangers. The word strangers hung in the air like an accusation. I felt my cheeks flush, but I wasn't about to let Paula shame me for having a good time. It was harmless fun, I said, taking a sip of wine. Something I think more people could use in their lives. Marcus cleared his throat uncomfortably. Maybe we should talk about something else. But I was just getting started. The combination of Paula's judgment and Daniel's silent treatment all weekend had pushed me past my breaking point. If they wanted to make this about Friday night, then fine. I'd give them something to really talk about. Actually, you know what? I said, setting down my wine glass with perhaps a little more force than necessary. I'm proud of Friday night. I'm 32 years old and I felt beautiful and desirable for the first time in months. Some gorgeous guy wanted to dance with me, and I said yes. And you know what? It was amazing. The table had gone completely silent. Even Tessa was staring at me with wide eyes. He was probably 28 or 29, I continued, warming to my subject. Tall, dark hair, incredible smile. He told me I was beautiful, and he held me like I was something precious. When was the last time anyone in this family made me feel that way? Philo, Daniel said quietly, but I was on a roll now. Don't philo me, I snapped. You want to sit there in judgment, fine, but at least I'm living my life instead of just going through the motions. At least someone appreciates me. Paula's face had gone pale. Philomene, I think you've said enough. Have I? Because I'm just getting started. You all act like I committed some terrible crime by dancing with an attractive man. But where's the judgment for Daniel, who barely acknowledges I exist most days? Where's the concern about a husband who's more interested in his phone than his wife? Marcus stood up abruptly. I think I should take Tessa to the living room. No, I said, perhaps more sharply than I intended. Tessa should hear this too. She should know that her mother isn't going to apologize for feeling good about herself. Mommy, Tessa said in a small voice, I don't like it when you talk loud. The sight of my daughter's frightened face should have stopped me, but I was too far gone. The wine, the stress of the weekend, and years of feeling undervalued had combined into a perfect storm of poor judgment. Sometimes grown-ups need to talk loud, baby, I said, trying to soften my tone. Sometimes that's the only way people listen. Daniel finally looked up from his plate. That's enough, Philo. Is it? Because I don't think I've made my point yet. I turned back to Paula. Your son has turned into the most boring man on the planet. Do you know what we talk about? Bills and schedules. That's it. When was the last time he complimented me? When was the last time he planned a date, or even suggested we do something fun together? Maybe if you acted like a wife instead of a teenager, he'd treat you like one, Paula said coldly. The comment hit like a slap. Excuse me? You heard me. You're a mother, Philomene. You have responsibilities. You can't just go out flirting with random men because you're feeling neglected. One dance, I said, standing up so quickly my chair scraped against the floor. One dance with one man, and you're all acting like I had an affair. Weren't you? Marcus asked quietly. The question stopped me cold. What did you just say? I said, weren't you having an affair? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're awfully invested in this stranger's opinion of you. That's ridiculous. It was one dance. Was it? Daniel's voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear him. I turned to look at my husband, and something in his expression made my stomach drop. What's that supposed to mean? Instead of answering, Daniel pulled out his phone. After a few taps, he set it on the table where everyone could see the screen. It was a video, grainy and obviously taken from a distance, but clear enough to see me dancing with Evan, clear enough to see how close we were, how my hands lingered on his shoulders, how I looked up at him like he was the most fascinating man I'd ever met. "Where did you get this?" I whispered. "Does it matter?" Daniel asked. "Is this your idea of one innocent dance?" I stared at the video, watching myself flirt and laugh and touch the stranger like I was single. From the outside, it looked exactly like what Marcus had suggested, like I was having an affair. "It's not what it looks like," I said weakly. "Really? Because it looks like my wife dancing with another man like she wishes she was married to him instead of me." The pain in Daniel's voice was unmistakable, and for the first time since Friday night, I felt a real stab of guilt. But I was too far in to back down now. "Maybe I do," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Maybe I wish I was with someone who actually noticed me and made me feel special instead of taking me for granted every single day." The silence that followed was deafening. Tessa had started crying quietly, and Marcus was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Paula looked like she wanted to throw me out of her house bodily. But it was Daniel's expression that finally broke through my anger. He looked devastated, like I'd just confirmed every insecurity he'd ever had about our marriage. "Daddy?" Tessa's small voice cut through the tension. "Are you and Mummy getting divorced?" The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Daniel looked at our daughter, then at me, then back at Tessa. "I don't know, sweetheart," he said softly. "I honestly don't know." Without another word, he stood up and walked out of the dining room. A moment later, we heard the front door close and his car starting in the driveway. "Well," Paula said, her voice dripping with disgust, "I hope that dance was worth it." As I looked around the table at the faces of my family, my daughter crying, my mother-in-law glaring, my brother-in-law shaking his head in disappointment, I was beginning to wonder the same thing. Monday morning arrived with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Daniel had slept in the guest room Sunday night and left for work before I woke up, leaving only a note saying he'd pick up Tessa from school and take her to his mother's for dinner. No explanation, no discussion, just a clear message that he was done pretending everything was normal. I tried calling him twice on my way to work, but both calls went straight to voicemail. By the time I reached my office at Brennan & Associates, I was oscillating between anger and anxiety in a way that made it impossible to focus on anything. "Rough weekend?" asked my colleague Sarah Chen, poking her head into my cubicle around 10 o'clock. "You could say that," I muttered, staring at the same email I'd been trying to respond to for 20 minutes. "Want to talk about it?" Part of me did want to talk about it, but I wasn't sure how to explain the situation without making myself look bad. How do you tell someone that your marriage might be falling apart because you danced with a stranger to win a $50 bet? "Just some family drama," I said finally. "Nothing I can't handle." But as the morning wore on, it became clear that I was handling exactly nothing. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. "How was Sunday dinner? Did you tell Daniel he needs to step up his game?" The message made me laugh bitterly. If only it were that simple. Another text, this one from my mother. "Honey, Paula called me. We need to talk." My stomach sank. If Paula was calling my mother, things were worse than I thought. My mother, Cleo, had always been my defender, the one person who consistently took my side in any conflict. But even she had limits. I was still staring at my phone when my supervisor, Janet Morrison, appeared at my desk. "Philo, can I see you in my office for a minute?" Janet's tone was professional but strained, and I felt a new wave of anxiety wash over me. Had someone at work heard about what happened at dinner? Had Daniel called my office? I followed Janet into her corner office, noting that she closed the door behind us. Never a good sign. "Is everything okay at home?" she asked without preamble. "You seem distracted today, and frankly, you look like you haven't slept." "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Just a little tired." "Philo, we've worked together for 3 years. I know when you're not fine." Janet sat down behind her desk and gestured for me to take the chair across from her. "Look, I'm not trying to pry into your personal life, but if something's going on that might affect your work, I need to know." The concern in her voice almost broke me. Janet had always been a good boss, fair and supportive, and the idea that my personal drama was affecting my professional life made everything feel even more out of control. Daniel and I are having some problems, I admitted. It's nothing that will interfere with my job, I promise. What kind of problems? I hesitated, trying to figure out how much to share. He thinks I was inappropriate at a girls' night out on Friday. He's blowing it way out of proportion. Janet raised an eyebrow. Inappropriate how? I danced with someone, that's it. But apparently that makes me a terrible wife and mother. Even as I said the words, I could hear how defensive I sounded. Janet seemed to notice it too. Philo, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Are you having an affair? The question hit me like a physical blow. No, God, no. It was one dance with a stranger at a bar. I don't even know his last name. But you do have his contact information. I stared at her, wondering how she could possibly know that. How did you... You left his business card on the printer Friday morning when you were making copies of the Henderson file. My face burned with embarrassment. I'd completely forgotten about printing those documents before I left for the weekend. Evan's card must have fallen out of my purse. It's not what you think, I said weakly. Philo, I don't care what you do in your personal life, but I do care when it starts affecting the workplace. 3 different people have asked me if you're getting divorced, and it's only Monday morning. The humiliation was overwhelming. I'd worked so hard to build a professional reputation, and now my colleagues were gossiping about my marriage falling apart. I understand, I said quietly. I'll be more careful. Good. And Philo, whatever's going on with Daniel, you might want to consider whether it's worth destroying your family over. I left Janet's office feeling worse than when I'd arrived. The rest of the day passed in a blur of attempted productivity and mounting anxiety. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was Daniel finally responding to my messages, but it was always someone else. My mother wanting to chat, Jenna asking for details about the family dinner, Marcus sending a brief text saying he was disappointed in me. By 5 o'clock, I was exhausted and desperate to go home and try to salvage what was left of my marriage. But when I pulled into our driveway, Daniel's car wasn't there. The house felt eerily quiet without Tessa's usual after-school chatter. I tried calling Daniel again, and this time he actually answered. "Where are you?" I asked without preamble. "At my mother's with Tessa." "When are you coming home?" There was a long pause. "I'm not sure I am." The words hit me like ice water. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I need some time to think, Philo. About us, about our marriage, about whether this is fixable." "Fixable? Daniel, I danced with someone. I didn't sleep with him. I didn't even kiss him. You're acting like I committed adultery." "Aren't you?" The question was so quiet I almost didn't hear it. "What?" I said, "Aren't you committing adultery? Maybe not physically, but emotionally, because the woman I watched in that video wasn't acting like someone who was happily married." I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to point out that he was being ridiculous, but something in his tone stopped me. He sounded tired, defeated, like he'd already given up on us. "Daniel, please come home so we can talk about this." "I don't think talking is going to fix this, Philo. I think you've made it pretty clear how you feel about our marriage." "That's not fair. I was angry yesterday. I said things I didn't mean." "Did you? Because it sounded like you meant every word." Before I could respond, I heard a car pulling into the driveway. Through the window, I could see a delivery truck parking behind my car. "I have to go," I said. "Someone's here." "Philo, wait." But I'd already hung up, distracted by the uniformed courier, walking up to my front door with a large manila envelope in his hands. "Philomene Vane?" he asked when I opened the door. "Yes." "I need you to sign for this." I scrawled my signature on his electronic pad, accepting the envelope with growing dread. The return address was from Morrison, Klein & Associates, a law firm I'd never heard of. My hands shook as I tore open the envelope and pulled out the contents. The first page was a formal letter on legal letterhead, but the words seemed to swim before my eyes. Petition for legal separation, custody arrangements, division of assets. Daniel was divorcing me. I must have read the legal documents a dozen times before the words finally sank in. Daniel wasn't just asking for time to think. He was asking for a formal separation with the clear intention of filing for divorce. The papers outlined temporary custody arrangements that would give him primary physical custody of Tessa, with me getting every other weekend and one evening per week. Every other weekend, I would see my daughter 4 days a month. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone as I dialed Daniel's number. This time, he answered on the first ring. "You got the papers," he said. It wasn't a question. "How could you do this?" My voice came out as a whisper. "How could you file for separation without even talking to me?" "We did talk, Philo. Yesterday at dinner you made it very clear that you'd rather be with someone else." I was angry. I didn't mean it. "Which part didn't you mean? The part where you said you wished you were married to someone else, or the part where you called me boring in front of our daughter?" I closed my eyes, remembering Tessa's frightened face at the dinner table. "I'm sorry about that. I should never have involved Tessa." "No, you shouldn't have, but you did. Just like you shouldn't have been flirting with strange men in bars, but you did that too." "It was one dance, Daniel. One stupid dance that I never should have agreed to, but it doesn't mean I don't love you." "Doesn't it?" His voice was so quiet I had to strain to hear him. "Because I've been thinking about this all weekend, Philo. Really thinking. And I can't remember the last time you acted like you loved me. I can't remember the last time you seemed happy to see me when I came home from work, or the last time you initiated any kind of physical affection, or the last time you talked to me like you actually enjoyed my company." The accusations stung because they weren't entirely unfair. I had been distant lately, caught up in my own dissatisfaction and resentment. Marriage is work, Daniel. It has ups and downs. That doesn't mean you just give up. I'm not giving up. I'm protecting myself and our daughter from someone who clearly doesn't want to be part of this family anymore. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you seemed genuinely happy at home? When was the last time you talked about our future together instead of complaining about how boring your life is? I opened my mouth to argue, but found I couldn't think of a good answer. When had I stopped being grateful for what I had and started focusing only on what was missing? "I want to come home," I said finally. "I want to see Tessa and work this out. Tessa's staying with my mother tonight, and I think it's better if we keep some distance while we figure out the legal arrangements." "Legal arrangements? Daniel, this is insane. We can go to counseling. We can work on our communication. We don't need lawyers." "Yes, we do." His voice was firmer now, more resolved. "Because I can't trust you anymore, Philo. I can't trust that you won't decide our marriage is too boring again and go looking for excitement somewhere else. I would never cheat on you. You already did." The words hung between us like a verdict. Dancing isn't cheating. What you did Friday night was cheating. Maybe not physically, but emotionally. You gave another man the attention and affection that should have been mine. You let him touch you and hold you and make you feel things that I apparently can't make you feel anymore. I could hear the pain in his voice, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I began to understand how deeply I'd hurt him. But understanding didn't make the legal papers in my hands any less terrifying. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "How do I fix this?" "I don't know if you can." The honesty in his answer was devastating. "So that's it? One mistake and our 7-year marriage is over?" It wasn't one mistake, Philo. It was a pattern. The dancing was just the final straw. "What pattern?" "The constant criticism. The way you roll your eyes when I try to talk to you. The way you make me feel like I'm never enough for you. The way you've checked out of our marriage emotionally while expecting me to just accept it." Each accusation felt like a slap, partly because they weren't entirely wrong. I had been critical lately and dismissive, and emotionally distant, but that didn't mean our marriage was beyond saving. People change, Daniel. I can change. Can you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you already have changed into someone I don't recognize. That's not fair. Fair? For the first time, there was real anger in his voice. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I had to find out my wife was dancing with other men by seeing a video someone took at the bar? Is it fair that you humiliated me in front of my entire family? Is it fair that our daughter had to ask if we're getting divorced because you couldn't control your temper? I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry about all of it. I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix this, Philo. Sorry doesn't make me trust you again. What would? What would it take to make you trust me again? There was a long silence. I honestly don't know, and that's the problem. After he hung up, I sat alone in our empty house, staring at the legal papers spread across the kitchen table. The silence was deafening. No Tessa chattering about her day, no sound of Daniel's key in the door, no normal family dinner preparation. Just me and the wreckage of my marriage. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Morrison, Klein and Associates. If Daniel wanted to play hardball with lawyers, then fine. I'd get my own lawyer and fight for my family. But as I started to dial, I noticed something tucked into the back of the legal envelope, a smaller envelope with my name written on it in Daniel's careful handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper and what looked like a flash drive. The note was brief. Philo, you should look at this before you call your lawyer. There's more evidence than just the dancing video. I'm sorry it came to this, but I won't be made a fool of anymore. Daniel. With trembling hands, I inserted the flash drive into my laptop. The screen filled with a folder containing dozens of files, photos, videos, screenshots of text messages I didn't remember sending, bank records, even what looked like a timeline of my activities over the past several months. As I clicked through the files, my stomach dropped further with each new piece of evidence. Daniel hadn't just seen me dancing with Evan. He'd been documenting what he clearly saw as a pattern of suspicious behavior. Late nights out with friends, unexplained charges on our credit card, text messages to Jenna complaining about our marriage, even photos of me talking to male colleagues at work functions. Individually, none of it was particularly damning, but taken together, it painted a picture of a wife who was unhappy, secretive, and possibly looking for a way out of her marriage. The last file was a video, and when I opened it, I saw myself at the Velvet Loop again. But this wasn't the same video Daniel had shown at dinner. This one was longer, clearer, and showed me taking Evan's business card and slipping it into my purse. It showed me looking around the bar like I was checking to see if anyone was watching. It showed me looking guilty, because I was guilty, maybe not of adultery, but of betraying my husband's trust, of seeking attention from another man, of being so focused on my own dissatisfaction that I'd lost sight of what really mattered. As I sat there staring at the evidence of my own poor choices, I realized that Daniel was right about one thing. Sorry wasn't going to fix this. The question was, what would? The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove straight to Daniel's office. I'd spent the entire night going through the evidence folder, and what I'd found there had shaken me to my core. Daniel hadn't just stumbled across my dance with Evan. He'd been systematically documenting what he saw as my emotional withdrawal from our marriage for months. The security guard in the lobby of Daniel's building knew me, so getting upstairs wasn't a problem. But when I reached his floor, his assistant Jennifer looked uncomfortable when she saw me. "Is he in?" I asked, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "He is. But Philo, he asked me not to." "It's okay, Jennifer. I just need 5 minutes." I walked past her desk before she could stop me and knocked on Daniel's office door. When he looked up and saw me, his expression didn't change. "We need to talk," I said, closing the door behind me. "I think we said everything we needed to say last night." "No, we didn't. I looked at your evidence folder." Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying my face. "And?" And I understand now why you filed for separation. I understand why you don't trust me. I sat down across from his desk, clutching my purse like a lifeline. But Daniel, I need you to understand something too. I never meant for any of this to happen. Which part? The flirting with other men or the getting caught? The question stung, but I forced myself to stay calm. I never flirted with other men. Evan was the first time I'd so much as looked at another man since we got married. What about Jake Morrison from the Christmas party? I stared at him blankly. What about him? Daniel pulled out his phone and scrolled through something before turning the screen toward me. It was a photo from our company Christmas party 3 months ago, showing me laughing at something Jake had said while standing closer to him than was probably necessary. You talked to him for 45 minutes that night, Daniel said quietly. I timed it. He was telling me about his divorce. I was being polite. Were you? Because in this photo, you look like you're hanging on his every word. I studied the image, trying to remember that conversation. Jake had been going through a messy divorce, and I'd felt sorry for him. But looking at the photo now, I could see how it might have appeared to Daniel, like I was flirting rather than just being friendly. What about Tom Chen from your office? Another photo, this one showing me having coffee with my colleague Tom, during what I remembered as a perfectly innocent work discussion about a difficult client. You've been watching me, I said, the reality of it finally sinking in. I've been paying attention to my wife, something I apparently should have been doing more carefully all along. This is crazy, Daniel. You've been stalking me. I've been trying to figure out why the woman I married turned into someone who acts like she can't stand to be in the same room with me. The pain in his voice was unmistakable, and I felt that familiar stab of guilt. I don't act like that. Don't you? When was the last time you kissed me goodbye when I left for work? When was the last time you asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer? When was the last time you initiated any kind of physical intimacy? I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it again. He was right, and we both knew it. I've been unhappy, I admitted quietly. But that doesn't mean I was looking to cheat on you. What does it mean then? It means I felt invisible. It means I felt like we were just going through the motions. It means I missed feeling desired and attractive and interesting. So you decided to find those feelings with other men? No, I decided to have one night out with my friends, and it got out of hand. Did it get out of hand, or did you let it get out of hand? The distinction was important, and we both knew it. Had I been an innocent victim of circumstance, or had I made a series of choices that led me to that dance floor with Evan? I made poor choices, I said finally. I can admit that, but I never intended to hurt you or our marriage. Intent doesn't matter, Philo. Impact does, and the impact is that I can't trust you anymore. So what happens now? You take Tessa and leave me with nothing. Daniel's expression softened slightly. I don't want to take Tessa from you. I want what's best for her. But right now, what's best for her is stability, and I can provide that. I can provide stability too. Can you? Because based on your behavior lately, it seems like you're more interested in reliving your 20s than being a mother and wife. Daniel's accusation cut deep because it was true. I'd been chasing the feeling of being alive and ignoring the fact that I was a married 32-year-old with a 7-year-old daughter. He told me he'd already filed for divorce, hired a lawyer, and documented everything, and that counseling could be for me, but he was done trying to fix our marriage. When he asked if I'd still choose this life if I could go back, I couldn't answer fast enough, and that silence said everything. He handed me his lawyer's card, said I should get my own, and reminded me that Tessa didn't need details, just honesty and parents who put her first. I left his office, knowing I'd lost my husband, my family, and the future I'd taken for granted, over one reckless night with a stranger whose last name I didn't even know. Sitting in my car, staring at a text from his lawyer about custody and assets, I finally understood that this wasn't a bad dream or a rough patch. My life as I knew it was over, and it was my fault.